Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Thank you for joining. This is the Meet the Author digital series, and the book is Swim, Bike, Bonk, Confessions of a Reluctant Triathlete. Mike McGough here. I'm going to be the host for this bit of time, and I want to say thank you to the Pequot Library for making this happen. The Pequot Library has been important to Dana and I. We live in Southport. We've been volunteers for many years, everything from sorting books to delivering books to teachers. And Pequot is a big part of the community. And so we're happy to support anything that they're doing. And this is a great series. A word on how this whole thing came about. So probably as trying to recapture some of my more younger athletic days, I have participated and completed the 2016 Florida Ironman and the 2018 Maryland Ironman. And as part of that, Dana has gotten me Ironman books to read over the course of the holidays and different things. And they all seem to be very technical, very dark, very detailed, and very serious. And she got me this book, Swim, Bike, Bonk, last Christmas, and I read it and immediately said, this is different than all the others. This appeals to a whole bunch of different people. Whether you've done 50 Ironmans and you're part of the quote-unquote cult, whether you've done 2 like me, whether you're maybe training or doing 1, whether you're a family member that has lived through somebody doing an Ironman, as Dana's shaking her head yes. Whether you think this sport is insane and you want to find out what these lunatics are all about, or whether you're thinking, well, maybe I can do one. I think this appeals to all of these types of people, which I wanted Dana to read the book after I did, and she begrudgingly did and really said the same thing, and then said, you know what? One of her duties is being part of this Meet the Author committee, and we thought, wow, this would be great. This would be a great topic. And so from there, it became this great event. So we're thrilled to do it. We think it's going to be pretty interesting. And so what I'll do is I'll hand it over. I'll introduce Will. And basically the way it's going to work is Will and I are going to chat for about a half hour, and Will's going to expound on a whole bunch of different topics around the book. And then what we hope is for the remaining half hour, because we have all these different types of constituents, that we get all kinds of questions, and no question is out of bounds. And I think between Will and myself, we can probably handle almost any question. So we encourage that. So Will McGough is the author of Swim, Bike, Bonk, Confessions of a Reluctant Triathlete. And I'll read the sentence at the back of the book, which kind of describes him. Will is an award-winning international travel writer and the owner of Wake and Wander Media. He graduated from Virginia Tech a long time ago and has written for a variety of adventure and travel publications. He also guides trips and splits his time between Hawaii, Colorado, and the road. So without further ado, Will, I'll ask you the first question that probably is the most relevant question, and that is why? Like, what was the reason behind the book? How did you come about to do this?
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you guys all for being here. It's been a crazy year, I'm sure, for all of us, pandemic life, but this feels really good to be doing this and to speak with all you and to see you show up. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Yeah, Mike, great question to start with. Probably the number one thing I've been asked the whole time. But the story is kind of funny how it came about. So just bear with me for a moment. I'll kind of walk through. As Mike said, my main job is as a travel journalist, travel writer. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now. And so most of my job is about going somewhere new, going into a different culture, exploring that, and then sort of presenting that to the world through my eyes, you know? And that's really how you get your individuality as a writer with your own personal spin on it. And so I had written for magazines and websites and stuff for a long time. I'd been in the industry, but I wanted to do a book. And so as I was kind of looking around for topics, you know, it was very interesting looking at a travel book or something like that, somewhere I could go and explore. And my sister had always been into marathons and things like that. And I've always been a little bit athletic, and we can talk more about that later. But So I was just kind of looking around the world, like what is something cool I could go and infiltrate and do. And at the time, I was spending most of my time in Hawaii, and I had watched a lot of races come up there of different varieties. But one thing that came into my brain was that, the Ironman World Championships were there every year. So I was kind of familiar with it, but I just never really knew what it was, honestly. I mean, you're preoccupied with other things, so this event happens and whatever. Well, at some point during the spring of 2017, I got the ear of a publisher. And so I started pitching book ideas to them. And a lot of it was spaghetti on the fridge, just trying to get something to stick. But we were looking at different events we could do around the world, different cultures, etc. And one of the pitches I had, it was going to be like a series and to look at like different competitive events throughout the world, which now saying it out loud maybe doesn't sound that interesting, but he really honed in on the Ironman part of that and really pulled it out and like was kind of fascinated. And we started looking into it. As I said, I have my sister who's into marathons. I had some friends who had done smaller triathlons. So I started poking around, and as you guys talk about, people do this sport for so many different reasons, and I just really got interested in it that spring and summer. So my publisher and I started to talk about it more and more and more, and through our preliminary research, we just realized what like a tight-knit community it was, how emotional it was, as well as physical, and just really the Ironman, like from the outside. I mean, you guys are all involved in it, but when you're literally standing on the outside without any experience, I mean, you say what the distances are to people and their head explodes. They're like, why would you do that, right? And so that's where this question of why comes, and I'm sure you guys have all heard it at some point during your careers and stuff. And so we're like, hey man, this could work, so it just gains steam, and so to make a long story short, that summer we decide like, okay, let's do a book that kind of looks at the history of the Ironman and sort of looks at this culture. And originally my publisher was like, hey, you can just do research if you want to get involved, whatever you want to do. And I said, like in the spirit of immersive journalism, I'm gonna do it. Like, let's do it. So this is sometime in August of 2017, and we're finalizing everything. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is a book. This is a big project. I'm gonna do my research, like starting now. I'm gonna start training. And then like next year around this time, I'll do, next summer, I'll do an Ironman. I'll have all that time to infiltrate, yada, yada. And then I'll write the book. And, this is a long process. This is a book. This is my first book, so I was a little naive. And so I go into my meeting in August of 2017, and, we're signing the paperwork. It's all good to go. And after we sign it, I'm like, okay, so here's my plan. I'm going to train, and these are the Ironmans I'm targeting next summer, and yada, yada. And he just says, Will, this all sounds great. Like, I love your outline. I love your plan. There's just one hitch. I'm like, okay, what is it? He says, well, you have to have the entire book written and submitted to me by January of 2018, just, 5-6 months from then. And I looked at him like, dude, like, have you read this? Do you know what an Ironman is? Like, the last one of the year is in November. Like, that's the last possible one I could do. And he just shrugs his shoulder and says, well, that would probably make the book more interesting, don't you think? I'm like, oh, okay, for you, I guess, yeah. And so I really didn't tell that story in the book because sometimes that's frowned upon in the industry to like talk shop, like of how things work. So I stayed away from it. But a lot of people have asked me that, and I sort of wish I would address it because I was, a lot of people criticize me because they're like, well, you're the idiot that, tried to do it in 3 months or whatever. And it really wasn't my fault. That wasn't my intention. But to my publisher's credit, it did make it more interesting. So really that day that I signed the book contract, in the beginning of August is really page 1 of the book, starting off, okay, like 100 some days to go. Like, here we go. Let's rock it and see. So that's why the time frame of the book is so short. But, as we can talk about, I think it just made it really, really fun. And it really wasn't fun for me in a lot of the ways. But the end product turned out to be cool because, yeah, it was like packing everything, into this 3-month process. So that's off I went.
Well, and so it's very common. You talk about something, it was great, it was a lot of fun, it was good to do. During it, as we all can speak about at any of these athletic events, it's not great while you're doing it. It's good to talk about after, but it's not great in doing it. So the training. Now, I will say that this book is very humorous. There's a lot of funny parts to it, which I think makes it really interesting. But in the training, talk a little bit about how you approach the 3 months. And I know one of the big things that stops people from thinking about an Ironman is they might be a good biker or a good runner, but many people are not good swimmers, and I am one of those. And so, yeah, talk a little bit about how you approach a training, but also, which of the legs that were more comfortable with, and how you think people should approach that.
Right on. Yeah. So I was lucky because, again, coming into this, not knowing anything, I had these same questions like, what should I focus on? What should I do? And the big thing I realized I had going for me was that I have a background in competitive swimming. So when this was a long time ago, but I was a competitive swimmer growing up and through high school. So I was very comfortable in the water. And, although it's a very long swim, something definitely you would need to put some time in to train for, I wasn't scared of that, and I was pretty confident in my ability. So what I did with the shortened time frame is I just focused on my weaknesses. And really, that would be the advice I would give to anybody, because coming into it, of course, it depends on your goals. If you're trying to win, this is a whole different story. But, I think most people out there are just trying to run a good personal race. They may have a set time goal, but, the idea is to finish, not to die, not to, really get bonk, as you would say. And so I just focused on my weaknesses, and I put together, honestly, I really didn't have a very strict plan. It was sort of because I was learning so much on the go, it was constantly evolving. But if you're just trying to finish and get there, I think you can deal with a little weaknesses here and there and make up for it where you're strong. So yeah, I segregated out. I actually did probably 5 to 6 swim workouts total, the whole 3 months. I would do like a couple, just get loosened up. I did one training competitive swim, which was the original Ironman, the Waikiki Rough Water, taking you guys through that. But other than that, I really didn't do any swim training. Now I kind of paid for it because I got a little injured towards the end with my shoulders. But I completely focused on the running and the biking, and specifically the biking, because that is the longest part of the event. You're going to spend the most time on the bike, and really it's the most uncomfortable in my opinion. So I really put the time into that. Right. Training plans, we could talk about that. That was a huge thing for me because, and a lot of this intertwines, like when you get into the culture, everybody has an opinion about what you should do and how you should approach it. And everybody wants to tell you their way. But the biggest secret of Ironman that I, uncovered is that really there is no right or wrong. It's only what works for you. And so I just really focused, and I really committed to this in the first month, is to just do my workouts to where I got to a point where I was mentally comfortable with what I was doing. I wasn't always physically comfortable. Of course you had bad days and things go wrong, but really mental confidence and even if you are in the best shape of your life, right? You are like specimen. Even the pros will tell you this. They have they have challenges. They have points in the race where they feel low. And so you can be as in shape as you want. Like you're still going to hit those mental and physical walls, and being mentally confident is going to give you the ability to overcome that. So I really focused on that, just trying to walk away every 2 days, every week, when I check in with myself, like, am I confident about this? And if I'm not, well, that's where I need to put my energy. And so I focused on that. And so I really, I like I say, the whole 3 months, I probably got in the water 5, 6, 7 times maximum.
Okay. Well, this is a great segue into, you mentioned the culture, and I can only imagine, and I read some of it in the book, but I could also picture it as you're looking for a 3-month training plan for the Ironman, some of the looks and comments that you're going to get. Talk a little bit about your interactions with, call it the culture, or the people that, were giving you advice or telling you not to do this. And some of those interactions, which are really funny in the book, but I think it tells a lot about the Ironman typical participant.
Totally. Yeah. So it's interesting with the Ironman because of its like extreme nature. There are many things in life like that you might need advice on. And there are so many people in the world that can give you those different perspectives on it. How to drive a car, like just normal things that most people do and are familiar with. It's easy to get advice. So you can kind of navigate that and you just talk to people around you. The thing with the Ironman I learned is that, in one of the beginning parts of the book, I sort of start telling my family and friends as a way to motivate myself to get going and sort of lock it in, okay, now I'm telling everyone I'm doing it, I'm really doing it. And what I quickly realized is that most general people had zero idea what the Ironman was. And if they knew what it was, or just like when I explained it to them, okay, now they know what it was, they were so baffled and like confused as to why I would want to do this, is that they had no advice. They were just like, wow, like good luck with that. So you really have no choice but to go to like the Ironman community. Like you can't, it's impossible to be like, well, I'll just kind of do it on my own. I mean, like you really have to like get into it. And once you do that, now you're entering like a whole new arena. And, you know, a lot of this is you guys are in this community, and a lot of what I'm saying is very generalized. Like I met so many nice people and welcoming people. But, you know, I also met a lot of people that weren't so nice, and a lot of those interactions are portrayed in the book. But the first thing I did was like, okay, you know, we have the internet here at hand, which is great. So I made a post, you know, in a couple Facebook groups and stuff like that, just saying, hey, you know, it's my first triathlon. I have no experience. And you know, the date's in 3 months. Like, what do you guys think? Like, well, you know, what can I do? And the feedback was just incredible. A lot of negativity, a lot of people like, don't do it, don't even try. You know, and it was so confusing because I was like, with my preliminary research, seeing that, okay, the Ironman is like anything is possible. And then everyone's telling me like, don't do it. You can't do it, you know? So that was kind of backwards for me. But you know, for me personally, like that is motivating for me when somebody's like, nah, you can't do it. You know, just don't even bother. Like, like leave it to us. Okay. You know, this was the kind of attitude I was getting, and people just really being like, you know, I'm an avid triathlete and I trained for 1 year for my last race and I didn't finish. So how dare you come here and say that you're going to like come on my turf? And so I was kind of like, all right, well, these people don't seem very nice, but I was just able to kind of turn that into, well, now I'm going to, I mean, my only choice was to turn it into like a motivating factor. And honestly, you know, again, like switching up a little bit, the time frame thing turned out to be one of the biggest misconceptions I have seen in the Ironman community, because most people do it for a year, right? And most people like extend out their training. Like Mike, you know, you were talking to me before. Your race just got suspended and delayed, so now you have like over a year, right? You have all this time, right, to think about it, to plan your training. But what that also provides you is a lot of time to make excuses. And like, okay, well, you know, I'm only here now, but you know, next week, or yeah, you know what? There's this thing tonight. I'm going to skip my training. You know, when you compress everything, and maybe not 3 months is not the answer for everyone, but when you sort of say like, all right, here's the minimum time I think I need, and then go do it, now you're really like working your mental angle, because there's no excuses. There's no like, oh, well, you know, I feel bad, so let me take a couple weeks off and this or that. It's like, no, like you need to figure out how to overcome that hurdle, and you need to do it now. And if you don't do it now, you're just making next week even more hard, and it's just going to compound and compound and get worse and worse. And so I found compressing everything, what everybody was telling me was, don't do it. You're going to compress, you know, you're not going to. And of course there are like injury concerns. I'm not saying it's a perfect system, but I turned into positive. I was like, you know, I have all the motivation now. Like everything is inside of me of saying, okay, like you have only a certain amount of time and you need to get it done. And that really prepared me for those tough moments in the race, because it's now or never in the race. And there's a lot of opportunities to quit and give up, slow down, take a break. And I think for me, like having that compressed timeline really helped. So yeah, like a lot of people, I mean, there are so many examples of like, you know, just internet people being rude, but then even people I met in real life. When I was getting all my first gear, you know, and trying to research this, I went down to the local tri shop, and I told the guy, you know, I got into this phase where I was just telling everybody, you know, and just to see their reactions, see what advice they would give. And so I'm telling the guy who's checking me out, you know, hey, I'm, you know, doing this Ironman, and, you know, in walks this guy, and he's like, oh, you should go talk to Eric here. You know, Eric's an Ironman, and he's actually doing Ironman Arizona, like same race you are. I say, okay, I go talk to him, and I say, hey, you know, I'm just starting out. And when I see this guy, you know, I describe him in the book as having a bit of a beer belly. He's, you know, not like a physical specimen, you know, I kind of look him up and down. I'm like, okay, I think I could run with this guy or whatever. You know, I'm making assumptions, of course. But anyway, I just am like, hey, you know, I'm new, and like, maybe we could go for a ride sometime and get a beer, and we could talk about things. And I would love someone to ride with, you know, I'm just trying to get miles in on the bike. And the guy literally looks at me, and he's just is like, hey man, I don't think that's going to work. Just I'm on a different level than you. And I don't know if you're going to get to my level. And so I can't spend that time. And I thought he was joking. I'm like waiting for the punchline. And he's just like, yeah, sorry. I'm like, oh, okay. But that was, again, another little feather I took and put in my hat. Be like, okay, this guy thinks, he's just so big and bad. And so I had all these just weird interactions where I couldn't figure it out. There was this really interesting article I came across about, 10 things not to say to a triathlete. And of course, this was on the Ironman's website. And, it was like, literally like, don't say this to me. And some of the things were like, don't tell us about the Tough Mudder you did. Don't tell us about like the 5K you ran, and the gist of it was because like, we're so far above that. And that really put me off, and I've talked to people in the community about that. And, again, there's perfectly normal people who are like, don't worry about those guys. But there is a pretty big portion of the community that sort of have that attitude. And, it turned out to be a great motivating factor for me. But there seemed to be this general consensus, and I think it takes back to what I said earlier, like everybody in their mind has an idea of what's right. And sort of what I see online and what I learned through my experience was like a year is the magic number. Like you say like, yeah, I'm doing it next year. It's like, okay, no matter where you are, people think that it's possible. But there was a lot of rush to judgment, without even asking me what my plan was or what my background was, how I was going to do it. It was basically just like, oh, you only have 3 months. Psh, like, you cannot do it. And, I think I proved that wrong. So I think that was like something that I would like to see change, and that I frankly kind of found annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can attest to the fact that having a bit of fear, whether it be a 3-month condensed time frame or being able to swim 2 lanes of a pool, like, and signing up for one of these things, it does motivate you in a way that you kind of have to do it. And I think for the people that I've seen that have committed to these things, it's more you commit and then you have to figure out what you're going to do, and it is motivating. So to switch gears a little bit, tell us a little bit about the social life or lack thereof, and the either significant others or family members that effectively are going through this with you, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I basically became like the crazy person that everyone knew. Like people would find like these athletic events all around the world, like the Kona 5, these 5 Ironmans, in a row, and just all these like extreme races. And they would basically email it to me with kind of like a little note, like, hey, this sounds right up your alley, like these crazy events. And so I became known as like, oh, well, Will's like, so that was kind of more funny. But yeah, one of the things that I discovered, and I'm so glad I went through the process and didn't just, do journalism from above, because one thing nobody talks about, and actually like a lot of the reviews of the book, people were sort of like, it's too graphic, it's too this. There is this graphic underbelly of the sport that people kind of, hint at via articles like, how to avoid digestive problems, like how to, make your significant other not hate you while training. But it's so much like more graphic and human than that, So I had a lot of problems. I mean, personally, we can start with that, just with your transition of yourself. And in the book, I really, in the beginning, tried to not let this overtake my life. My whole goal was, okay, like I want to do this and I want it to be a part of my life, but I still want to go have beers with my friends. I still want to go surfing. I still want to travel and do what I got to do. So like, I'm just going to commit time to this, and that's it. And because I worked from home and had a little bit of a, flexible schedule, and this was work for me, I could schedule that in. So I was unique in that sense. But yeah, like you go through this transition with yourself where you go from being a normal person to now where you look up, a month or 2 later, and you're like, oh my God, I just spent 3 hours riding my bike in my living room, watching old episodes of Lost. And now when I go see my friend, he's going to ask me what I did today, and I got to tell him that. And, it's just like, I'm like, what did I just do? Like, I just rode my bike in my living room for 3 hours. Like so like, that was a hard transition for me because obviously I was naive and thinking that it wouldn't overtake my life in some way. So the farther along we got, the more it was taking over my life, and not only my actual life, but my mental state, just constantly thinking, okay, what's the next step? How do I feel? What am I going to do tomorrow? And so that was hard for me personally. At the time, I was living with an ex-girlfriend, and it was probably even harder for her because, I mean, I was mad at myself, but think about her when she comes home and her boyfriend used to be fun and want to do things. Now he rode his bike in his living room for 3 hours, and now he wants to sit on the couch and recover. It's like, you know, a total lifestyle switch where you're just not the same person, you know, or, you know, you're trying to be, but you're also, you know, have this big looming thing, which is like the longest triathlon on the planet, that you're also trying to survive. So, I mean, we just had trouble in the beginning, of course, with, you know, scheduling, like where she would want to go to the beach on a Saturday, like a normal person. I'm like, well, I got to do like a 5-hour bike ride. And so switching that up was very difficult. And then, but mostly, like, again, and this is, I'm sorry if this is too graphic, but, you know, like our sexual relationship is really difficult. You know, I'm exhausted at the end of the day. And one of the most graphic parts of the book, you know, I sort of portray this one night where, you know, I'm realizing what a bad boyfriend I've been, and I'm trying to like make it up to her. And I don't want to spoil it, but basically, you know, I ends up like I'm suffering from this awful saddle soreness that causes me this horrible breakout, you know? So now I'm just like physically unattractive. And so it was really like, that part of it for me was just so strange and something I didn't expect. I guess looking back, it makes sense. But really the toll it takes on everyone around you, especially if you buy in, it's like all you're doing and all you're talking about. You know, I didn't necessarily lose any friendships because it was so compact into the 3 months, but I could definitely see that as one of the hardest challenges of getting into this sport full time, you know, aside from actually doing it.
Right, right. Well, and I told everyone this book was different than other Ironman books. You just got a little snippet of that right there. It's clearly, and it's a really funny book.
You will
Now,
learn more about me than you ever wanted to know. I
right,
promise you
right.
that.
So before we get to the day, just a little thought about that. Anything on the gear, on you know, what you need, or what's the minimum, or how can you get through this? A little bit on that.
Okay, that was another big thing. And, you know, as much as like the year-long myth of here's what you have, you know, you got to do this and you got to do that. The gear thing to me is just so overblown. Through my, you know, course of researching this and doing this, was told at every turn what I needed, and, oh, this is going to help you, you know, measure your sweat rate, calculate this, do that, you know, oh, you need at least this bike, yada, yada. I mean, I did the Ironman on a bike that cost less than $700 with shipping included to Hawaii. You know, I did upgrade my tires, but each of my tires was like $50. You know, I really had a very basic just road bike with the aero bars on it. It wasn't even a tri bike. And one of my biggest memories of the race, or really just like insights and sort of enlightenment almost, is coming down the hill in Phoenix. I don't know if you guys have done the Phoenix Ironman, but, you know, the bike loop, you know, that you go down a big hill and then kind of go in and finish. And I'm coming down this hill and I'm super relieved because I'm almost done the bike. And, you know, I'm just looking at these people coming up, you know, with these aerodynamic helmets on, with these fancy, like multi-$1,000 bikes, all outfitted with every accessory you can think of. But they're just struggling, you know, they're just miserable. And because of the timing, you know, I knew they weren't going to make the cutoff. And that was just such a heartbreaking thing for me, because somewhere along the way, someone told them that it was all the gear that would make the difference, but it's not the car, it's the engine, you know, it's you. And so I think, you know, if you're trying to be a pro and you want to shave like 3 seconds off your time for every 100 miles you ride, okay, get an aerodynamic helmet, you know, spend the money. But if you're just like doing this because you want the challenge or whatever your personal reason is, and you're not trying to be pro, for me, it didn't make a difference. I mean, if I finished in 13 and a half hours, or I finished in 14 hours, or if I finished in 12 and a half, really didn't matter to me. So long as I felt like I was giving it my all and accomplished it. So when you walk into a tri shop, there is so much for sale. There's so much to upgrade. Upgrade to these tires for $200 because you use 30% less wattage for every 50 miles you go. You know, it's just like, you got to get on the bike and pedal it, right? And you can have shave seconds here or there, but you got to get on the bike and pedal after you've swam for 2 hours, and then you got to get and run. And none of the fanciest gear on earth is going to help you complete that if you haven't. It's like you're the gear. You are the most important ingredient to this. So my advice would be, don't spend the money on all this gear upgrade. Spend the time on you and making your body comfortable and making sure that your legs feel good and everything like that. I really thought this whole focus on gear, which is what every Ironman event is about with the Ironman Village, it seems to be very overly commercialized, and I get it. But for someone that's not wanting to live that lifestyle, like they don't have to have the fanciest gear and they don't have to show this, this is a personal journey for them, forget it. I mean, Ironman's expensive enough. I mean, it's now over $900 to enter. For me, it didn't make sense. And so, and I felt bad for people, to spend, assuming that they trained for a year or whatever, I look at that and I just think, wow, these people put all this time in. They went through everything I went through, maybe on a larger scale. And now they're not going to finish it because, it just was sad. So that's not to say that, like someone on a normal bike could not finish, but my advice to anybody would be like, don't get caught up in gear. Like, gear is not going to get you to the finish line. Like, you're going to get yourself to the finish line.
And I think that's actually a really good message, because I subscribe to that in terms of people who are like, oh, wait, the barrier to entry is so large because of what they need to do. So, all right. So before we turn it over to the questions and get some interesting ones, give us a few memorable moments or thoughts during the race, during the day, for people who have never experienced it. Like, what are the things you remember? Obviously finishing, but other things across the day that you remember specifically.
Well, I think it actually all starts the night before, because I remember it was like you're awaiting some sort of like, if everybody's gone to school, that anticipation of the night before you're taking an exam or a test, and how kind of like that can get to you a little bit. That's how I felt. I felt I was like, Judgment Day was tomorrow, and here I am. And, you don't want to do anything. You don't want to exhaust yourself. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to da-da-da-da. So you're just sitting in your hotel room, and the wheels are turning, and you're just preparing yourself to stay up all night. I mean, that's exactly what you're doing. The night before was like really hard to sleep. I'm like, I'm going to go to bed at 7:30 so I can get the full 8 hours, and then it's like 1 a.m. and you're still looking at the clock. So like that was like the beginning. Like that's for me when the Ironman started, because again, like I said in the beginning, I think so much of this race is mental, and that confidence and belief in yourself. And that is tested every step of the way. And again, like something as simple as like, I'm not falling asleep. I'm not getting a good night's sleep. You get up in the morning, you're like, I didn't sleep at all last night. What do you do now? You've just put yourself at a disadvantage, because mentally you believe that you're not prepared anymore. So I really worked hard to be like, it doesn't matter how much I sleep. So I remember that night before pretty well, because I didn't sleep. And getting up, I remember being so relieved when I looked over the clock. I'm like, thank God it's 3:30. I can get up. Jesus, I don't have to lay here anymore and just worry. And now it was about action. Like now I have like, I'm a task guy. So it was like, okay, now I can get up and actually do something about it. So let's go. I remember getting to the race, and you'll see in the book, just getting to the starting line was an adventure for me. I don't want to go too far into it if you guys haven't read it, but I had 2 flat tires before I even started the race, if you can believe that. I got to the swimming starting line with just, moments to spare. So I basically had this huge, compacted, stressful experience between getting there and getting to the starting line, which actually turns out was a big relief for me, because I'm like, all right, you know what, whatever this thing throws at me, I'm going to get through it. Like, I already got 2 flat tires. I haven't even rode my bike yet. And now I'm like just making it to the event. And I remember getting ready to dive in. And I just said to myself, I'm like, you know what? I was kind of injured, my shoulders. I wasn't feeling good for the swim, but I knew I could complete it in the 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I wasn't feeling myself. But I just remember being at the start, and I said, you know what? This day is so random. Like, this has already all happened. God knows what awaits. I mean, I was to that point at that time, like I didn't really know if my bike was going to be functional when I got back to it, because I kept having these tire problems. So I was like, I could actually finish the swim and get out, and my bike is unrideable, and now I'm done. So I really was like, I'm just going to crush this swim, And so I really felt like I was like juiced up and pumped up the way you should be going into a race. And I sort of channeled all that stress that I was feeling from the morning into the swim. And one of the greatest moments of my life was coming out of the swim and going over to my bike and giving it a try. And I was like, oh my God, it works. I was like, big relief that I could actually like do it. I couldn't imagine if that's what had happened. So, and the bike, I mean, there's just so many funny moments. I mean, first off, Ironman they have a sense of humor. For all their faults, I'll give them that, with these signs that they put up where you're on the bike course and all of a sudden it's like, oh, mile 50. And they're like, wait, like I'm on mile 3. Like I won't get to that for another 2 hours, or, oh, mile 80, like last lap. Oh, wait, I got another, 5 hours before I get to that in earnest, So they kind of mentally even try and mess with you while you're going. I'm like, oh, thanks, Ironman. Yeah, like I don't have enough to worry about. Now you're teasing me. And so, because Arizona's a loop course. So that was funny. Then they paint your age on the back of your left calf. And so everyone knows how old you are, which is great until you're on like lap 3 and you're struggling. And I was 31 at the time. And I look over and this guy passes me, and on the back of his calf is like age 68 or something. And he's like blowing by me. And I'm like, oh, great. I feel really great about myself now. Awesome. Like I'm getting crushed. So, those roller coasters, those ups and downs. I mean, the bike is just amazing. Like how low you can get and how horrible you can feel. And then if you can pinpoint what that is, like sometimes it's like, oh, I got to eat, I got to get something in me. And that helps. But a lot of times it's just mental, like where you have to then like find something in your mind that's going to elevate you. And for me, a lot of that was like thinking about family and friends, thinking about all these Ironman people that I met that had told me I couldn't do it, thinking about that I'm supposed to write a book about this. And, I really don't want to write about a book where I didn't finish the race. Like everybody has their own motivations, right? So all these going, and it's amazing how you can like be so down and be like, wow, this is not going good. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, I could just crush this hill. Like I'm totally fine. And learning that about your body, for me, it's like one of the things I've translated into normal life. I mean, this is one of the things I ended up respecting the hell out of like triathletes is this perseverance. Like you are so down, but you overcome that and finish. And that is so applicable to other parts of life. So anyway, all that's in the book. And then, I mean, I said this like out loud to myself several times riding, like if in those last 10 miles of the bike, I was like, if I can get off this bike, I'll run 2 marathons. Like it was so uncomfortable by the end of it. I'm like, I'm totally done. So when I got off the bike and just like felt that breeze through my hair, taking the helmet off, I was like, I am king of the castle, baby. Like this is amazing. This is the best I've felt all day. So I remember that very specifically. The run, again, this is another kind of like thing that for me was overhyped. Everyone talks about the run and da-da-da. I mean, if you're just trying to finish like I was and you do the swim and bike in a reasonable amount of time, you have a lot of time to do the run. You have a lot of time to finish. And that gave me a lot of confidence because, when you're looking at something where unless, I have 8 hours to finish the run, I can walk a lot. I can run and walk. And so I remember that, just feeling that surge of confidence. It's like, I can do this. I think I'm going to do it, barring an injury. And that obviously changes your strategy. If you're going for a time, different story. But again, for me, and the run was kind of cool. Like once we got to the first lap sucked, obviously, because you're transitioning off the bike and you just rode. The bike for me took 7 hours. So, it's a long time and now you're getting your legs back. But lap 2 was great because again, at that point, I was even more sure, like, I'm going to finish this, I'm good. And then like starting to kind of, you see how the body language and the persona of people change from this great intensity to like, hey man, we just got 10 miles to go. You're like sharing a cup at the water cooler, leave alone the fact that 10 miles is more than most people run, in a week. And, it's like, but you're like, what's up, dude? Cool. Like, isn't this fun now? Like we're cruising. So I kind of remember that attitude change, which was nice. And then the finish was obviously, was really, I don't say emotional in terms of like, I had some breakdown, but it was just kind of like, for me, a big sigh of relief, like, thank God this is over. I'm so ready to be done. And it was kind of like a portal for me because, having dropped in, on this society, this community, and that was like sort of my exit, or so I thought. Turns out there's a total life after Ironman and a total impact that goes well beyond for months and weeks, which I'm happy to talk about as well. But yeah, and so like realizing that, like that you're not done once you're done. And honestly, the biggest disappointment of the day was, I got to be honest, I was motivating myself not only throughout the whole training, but through the race with, like a beer the size of a trash can after. Like, I'm just going to I can't wait to celebrate this and to be like, I did it. Like, I'm done. Bring it on. Let's do it. I felt horrible after the race. Like, I couldn't eat anything, like nothing. I ordered a beer and I took a sip and it was like, my body rejected it. So I basically went to bed that night with no celebration, and that was kind of disappointing, although, as you'll see in the book, I make up for it the following day. So those are kind of some of the, there's so much more. I mean, it's a 13-hour, it's a long race, but yeah. And then life after Ironman, now it's like, I called it the come down. You get so accustomed that this is my life. I'm training for this. Like, I'm doing it. I'm putting the time in. I'm sacrificing quality time with the people I love for this. And now it's just over. Like, nobody cares. I mean, yeah, like my mom was like, all right, Will, good job. You did it. Cool. And my friends were like, oh yeah, you did that last week? Oh yeah, that's right. It's like, okay. Nobody really cared. There was no, so it's just like, it's just over all of a sudden. It's just done. So it was, yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are shaking your heads. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I think that, no, it's a great description, and I'm harkening back on my experiences, very, very similar in terms of the emotions of the thing. And I think there is a part of people who do a lot of these that it's the come down gets completely replaced with, hey, which one are you doing next, right? And so there's a lot to that. All right, so why don't we turn it over to questions, and hopefully there are some. I think that I have a side bet that at least one person on this call is going to end up doing an Ironman in the next 2 years. So that's kind of the goal, is that as we answer these questions, Will, we have to answer them in a way that gets people fired up, and then we'll see which one of the people is going to do this. So I think you can I think it's in the chat, I believe, where we can get questions. So please ask us anything. I think there's more we can go into, but we'd rather hear questions to see what people are thinking, whether you think we're insane or otherwise.
Yeah, and why people are okay, we got one already.
Will you ever do another? Great question.
Oh man. Okay, so for me, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. It's not because I didn't learn a lot from the experience. It's not because I didn't appreciate it. In fact, it's not something I ever would have done, but I'm really happy I did it. And that is really the key thing with Ironman that I learned. Most people are really happy. They don't really describe the experience as that much fun, but as Mike alluded to in the beginning, it's sort of like after the fact, it's fun. So, it's kind of like looking back and be like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. And so that's kind of how I feel. The reason I wouldn't do another one, I'm still very into athleticism and athletics. And, I still, I run, like I'm going to go for a run after this call. How could you not? We've been talking about it. I work out a lot. I'm a big hiker and backpacker. And so I believe in fitness, but I really like to live a well-rounded, variety is totally the spice of life for me. I enjoy, waking up to new things and having this travel lifestyle and stuff. And I just don't think it quite fits in with me at this point in my life. Maybe if I wake up and I'm older and I feel differently, that's fine. I'm open to that. I'm not against doing another necessarily, but I just wouldn't put it on my radar right now because I took away so much from it. And now I want to apply those things. And I just don't want to get to a situation again where it's dominating my life, where I'm, not having healthy relationships or whatever like that. Especially, it's a difference if you're super passionate about it, but I wouldn't feel that way now. So I don't think I would do it.
All right, great question, and one that I was asking myself as I was reading the book. Did you beat the guy you met in the bike shop?
I did, guys. I did beat him. Yeah. I beat him. And not only that did I beat him, which was just great, is that he quit during the bike race, which is really ironic because he wouldn't go bike riding with me because he was on another level and he didn't even finish the bike himself. So that was really awesome. And yeah, I beat him. I felt good.
All right, I'll combine a couple questions here. Talking about what's next on the bucket list. Have you ever considered an ultra? Is Mount Everest next? There's a few of those types of questions that I'll join together.
Mount Everest, whew, that would be sweet. That would be cool. I right now, like, I just hope we can travel again soon. So honestly, like, I've been like a bird with its wings clipped. So I really have a ton of adventures that I want to do. I'm a big hiker. I don't know if I'm going to do Mount Everest, but I would really, I love to trek all over the world and do things like that. But right now, I'm just trying to get back on the road. I mean, it's been a crappy year, I think, for everybody.
Yeah.
But I don't have really any athletic events I want to do necessarily. Again, I just want to get out, enjoy life, stay fit, and experience a lot of different things.
Okay. Besides your cheap tires, how much did it cost in total? Like fee, travel, equipment, which I think is a great question.
100%. Yeah. I actually, in the book, have a little breakdown of it in the index. I don't know if you can see that. But the total cost, including the entry fee, my bike, swim gear, run gear, the cost to participate. Like, I did one training event, like the Waikiki Rough Water Swim I was telling you about. And all that included was $3,863. That also includes my travel from Hawaii to Phoenix, everything included, putting the bike on the plane, the hotel for 5 nights. It did not include food and drink consumption, like extra food that you don't believe me, but you will eat more than you typically do.
Right.
So it was about $4,000. I mean, for me, like, that's also a big part of why I don't think I would do another one, just because it seems really expensive just to swim, bike, run, And the more I learned about Ironman, just as a company, originally I was, again, naive. I thought this was some grassroots thing. Ironman really pumps this up and commercializes it quite a bit. That's not to say I don't support them or what they do, but I just don't see myself spending $4,000, to do another race. But yeah, it's not cheap. It's not cheap at all. And then that was minimum. Imagine people are probably spending way, way more.
Right. Do you have any next book ideas?
That's a great question. I do. Yeah, I have a couple. I'm sort of shy about them, not necessarily wanting to discuss the ideas before they come to fruition. But I'm considering some book ideas, and I'm also I'm thinking about opening a tour company / retreat company. My company is Wake and Wander, and so it's a travel mantra. There's a lot of things I really don't like about the modern travel community, and this is no offense to anybody, but just the way I see it, the industry tries to organize things as like, here are the 5 best things to do in Hawaii, and here's the 1 meal you can't miss, and people try and rank things. Here are the 10 best beaches in the world. Of course, no one's been to every beach in the world, but people are trying to rank your experiences and tell you how to feel about them, which is completely, in my mind, the wrong way to travel. Just because you visited 5 sites, you read an article and checked your boxes, doesn't mean you've experienced anything. So my travel mantra of Wake and Wander is a lot different. It's more about looking at experiences individually, sort of like a bunch of grapes. You're combining these to make up something that's, greater than the whole. And so I think my idea, hopefully when we get back to normal, is to share these things I've learned as being a world traveler and these concepts, and putting them into like a retreat or a travel company, and then offering trips that of course, like explore destinations and see some highlights, but more so allowing the traveler to see the destinations the way I see them, and guiding those trips and putting a staff around me to do that. So I think that's kind of my more next project. If a book comes along, a lot of people, I don't know if you guys are in the industry, but books nowadays, unless you're a celebrity, unless you are, have a huge platform, they're very difficult to market. Publishers aren't really concerned with you. You're not going to make a lot of money off of it. Any way you slice it. And so, and I'm not saying this as a discouraged person. I'm trying to it's a bit of a reality check. And so, so I'd love to do another book, but I think in my mind, in the next 5 years, couple years, it will be a side project for me, something that I do. It comes to fruition, cool. If we work, networking through publishers, but my next phase of life, I think, is going to be sharing my travel mantras and my travel experience.
Okay. What was your age? I think you mentioned it before, and an exact time for the Ironman. And I think this question is probably along the lines of, do you remember your exact time?
That's good. I don't remember the exact time. I could ballpark it. I was about, and wow, this is telling because maybe I'll overshoot it and give you less than it actually was. It was 13 and a half hours ballpark. I can look up exactly what it is. And I was 31 when I started training, and I was 32 when I did the race.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've got one more here.
13-14. Someone looked it up. 13-14. Thank you.
Ah, excellent. Selling yourself short. That's great. For somebody who is advice for someone who is skilled at one of the three legs, who might be thinking about, hey, do you think I can do this? What would you say to that?
Yes, do it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the one thing I've learned. I was talking about, like, the whole society, and again, maybe this is just a reflection of the people that are most vocal, but it's always kind of like negative, like, oh, well, you don't have enough time, or this or that, or but the whole idea of it is anything is possible. Yes, you can do it. I mean, I think that you can. One of the biggest things for me, is just to learn what your body and learn what you need to do. So for me, I was good at swimming, and the best piece of advice I got from someone was to do brick workouts and really practice that bike to run transition. And even when I would go, even when I didn't plan on running, I would get off my bike and I would run at least a mile. And most of the time it was just a mile or 2 miles, not even far. But just that repetition of getting off the bike and starting to run every time, your body's ready for it. And even just doing it, a couple of months for me, that was huge, that transition. So there's these little sort of, I think, tricks you can figure out where, again, the longest I rode before the Ironman was 75 miles on the bike, and the longest I ran was 14 miles. So I didn't even come close to the distances. I just sort of had built this confidence of okay, once I get there, I'll push into the unknown. And that extra motivation, that mental confidence, I'll get through the physical. I'll kind of push through that. So I think if you're proficient in none of them, you should do it. Obviously, the more you're proficient in, the less time. I realized a lot of my success in that short time was because swimming, I already had the background. So that's a really hard thing. If say you don't even know how to swim, that's going to take some time. So I definitely am sympathetic to that, and you should work on that. But especially if you're comfortable in the water, I mean, it's riding a bike, dude. I mean, you just got to put in the time, you got to put in the distance, and then practice transitioning to that run. And again, if your goal is just to finish, if you can get through the swim and you put in a solid bike, then the run is just kind of I took 5 hours, you could take, and I finished around between 8 and 9 p.m. The deadline was midnight. Okay, I had 3 more hours, it becomes more chill. So my advice would be if you can just get the bike under control, where, obviously hit the swim cutoff, but then, do your bike. I did it in 7 hours. I rode about 16 miles an hour, which, was challenging at times, and you fluctuate, going downhill, you make up time, going uphill, you lose it. But, I would encourage anyone to try. I don't think it's impossible at all. And I think it's, you come into it with the right attitude, and that's what gets you. It's up here.
Great. Well, based on that answer, I think I'm amending. I think every single person on here should do it. Forget one person. I think everybody should do it.
I'm curious is how many people here have done the Ironman or are planning on doing it, or why are you guys here? I don't know. I hate to turn around the interview, but I'm curious because you know, just the way the book is, like, are you guys looking at this, like, have you all done Ironmans and you're like, I just wanted to see what an idiot this guy is? Or are you looking at this as sort of like, I want to do it too?
I think there's all kinds. I think there's a few people who know me who think I'm crazy, and they figured they'd hear it from a different perspective.
I was kind of getting that impression too, Mike. Yeah.
You're not the first person, but I think it's from all angles. So listen, I think we're up on the hour. I think in the chat is we've linked to where the book can be purchased. I think it's a fantastic book. It's fun. It's lighthearted. And it's just an interesting read. And I think it gives you a glimpse into this race, which again, I can say the same thing. Like, I'm glad I've done them. It's not great doing it because you're going through it, but we do thank Will, amazing, great first book. Can't wait to hear, for the next one, but this has been great. We'll all get on the travel site once we can and get traveling with you.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I'm pretty easy to find. So if anybody has questions or comments, you can email me. Again, I'm easy to find. And I just thank you all for showing up. I mean, doing the book was a pleasure. It was a dream as a writer. I never in a million years would have predicted my first book would have been about torturing myself for 3 months, but I did it. And yeah, it was, and it's because of you guys that I'm here. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Great. Christine, anything to sign us off from?